Welcome, everybody. My name's Seamus Ford. I'm Landmark's Director of Community Engagement, and you're attending another Landmark Difference Makers interview. Today, we're going to be interviewing Uynghiem Ngo, who lives in the Dominican Republic and is dedicated to environmental restoration while fostering vibrant local economies and thriving communities. Through community-based poverty alleviation, environmental regeneration, and empowering local leaders and entrepreneurs, he strives to build a social and environmental resilience and enhance community capacities. And I really thank you for being here with us, Uynghiem.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're involved with a number of organizations. Why don't we start out by giving you a chance just to share about them?
Yeah, so I work with Global Coalition. So I'm the Chief Operation Officers at Global Coalition. And Global Coalition started out in Thailand. Our founders, Angeline and Kyle, they experienced bleaching in the coral reef for the first time. So they saw a really healthy reef and then it just bleached over for them. And that was the catalyst for the project, and they wanted to incorporate art. Art was their main focus in having the community come together and restoring the coral reef, and they launched their first sculpture there. And then I met them here in the Dominican Republic while I was working as a executive director at an AI company. And I got enrolled and I volunteered, and from there, the next stages of our project was I was sitting there on my computer working on my computer, and there's a mangrove forest. And my view is amazing view. It's like trees and this mangrove forest and there's water running through it. And one spring afternoon, I saw the whole thing go up in flames. And that instigated my project to get started. And I went to my neighbor and I asked him, do you guys do this often? Does this happen every year? And he says, yeah, this is happening for 15 years. And in speaking with my neighbor, I found out he worked for an organization called Amert Haiti and Despre Haiti. And he's been working in Haiti for about 14 years, reforesting and working in poverty location. His story is very impactful, right? He came to Haiti to be a monk, actually. And one day he was there just before the earthquake. I think it was just after the earthquake. He saw some children leaving really early at 3 a.m. in the morning to go somewhere. So he decided to follow those children. And he found out that children walked about, I think, 3 to 5 kilometers to collect water. And so he said, this shouldn't be right. So he started to work with an organization called Amert. And they're out of India. And so he started doing work with the children there, and he met his wife Sarah, who did emergency education in safe spaces in Haiti. And since then, they have an organization where they've created 5,000 self-help groups for women. They've reduced gender violence in their area up to 97%. And he's planted over 4 million trees. And he's also seen a lot of charities misuse the money that they've been given as well for the earthquake. And he said there's better ways to actually develop and create community and prevent poverty in a very holistic approach. And
Well,
so,
you're using two words that
uh,
often aren't necessarily associated with one another, and I think it's not an accident. Community and environmental restoration. Um, and you started out talking about coral bleaching, and that's for people who don't know, with rising rising sea temperatures and increased acidification of uh, shorelines, it's causing bleaching of coral, which that's kind of the the building block or the basis of the ecosystem around a lot of these island nations, right?
yeah, and actually a lot of our sushi that we eat, the fishes that the corals corals are a habitat, are a home for all these fishes and the marine animals. And when we launch a sculpture, we're basically building a home for them, a new home where there's no predators and no diseases or any kind of impacts that the current coral reef that's bleaching. So we create a new home for them. But yeah, coral reef is a home for all kinds of marine animals to exist, and also it corals are actually created out of limestone. They're skeleton. So limestone is like concrete. So they actually absorb carbon dioxide from the environment. For the sun goes to the ocean and then it does CO2 dissolves into the ocean, and these corals create their own structures as building blocks.
Well, so back to the question I wanted to ask you. So, uh, community and environmental restoration, you don't often hear put together like this, but it's not an accident with what you're doing. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, so uh, how I saw community and environmental restoration, you know, previously before coming to this island, I only saw environmental restoration as a commercial restoration. People going in, commercial planting restoration, they plant trees. But living in Dominican Republic, seeing environmental restoration done here doesn't really work without the community, because the community could be the one that also impacts your environmental restoration and also, you know, helps you and bees your eyes and ears to develop the community. And so when we do environmental restoration in community, we're actually building the community's capacity to handle climate change. So with the corals and the mangroves, they're the first layer of defense for when a hurricane hits the island or a tsunami or anything like that. So I'm sure you've heard about a lot of Puerto Ricos constantly being hit by hurricanes and flooding. The reason for that is they've totally taken out their mangroves, and then their coral reef doesn't really exist on that front end side anymore as much as it should. So, it's really important that we start with the community first in restoration and then educate them on what the importance of environment, though. One of the common things that happen here in the island of Hispaniola, which is Haiti and Dominican Republic, is people here still use charcoal as a main source of fuel. And then also sugarcane used to be a very profitable crop here. And one of the things with sugarcane is when you collect sugarcane, you have to burn your entire field to collect sugarcane. And so those practices have been going around for about 50 to 80 years. And so that's the only thing that people know. So it's really important for us to integrate into community and redevelop and educate them on the importance of not burning and, the importance of growing trees. One of the things that our partner did in Desprez in Haiti was there was a deficiency in nutrition. And so we grew moringa trees there. We grew moringa trees there for the population, and then educated them and had them create something for themselves so that they can actually survive actually in Haiti. And the area that we work in Haiti is very rural, so it's in Anse Rouge in Latinaire, and it's no one really goes there other than the people that live there. So
you talked about a moringa tree.
Moringa trees, yeah.
What is the fruit that produces?
It's not a fruit, but it's like a leafy, and it can produce an oil as well. So it's a very small little leaf, and people can eat it and chew it and whatnot as well.
Well, something I didn't realize is there's a correlation between mangroves, which are on the shoreline, and the coral reefs, which are just below the water surface, further out. How does the removal of mangroves affect coral reefs?
Yeah, so that's the typical, we call it a reef to ridge approach. And when you are living above ground, you have runoffs. So like chemicals, water, rainwater, and all kinds of things that will go into the ocean that will pollute the ocean, even your septic tank, asphalt, all kinds of stuff. Right. And now mangroves are your first barriers to filter the water that actually goes out into the ocean. So mangroves have a very unique property where a mangrove can grow 6 feet in 1 year. And I actually have a mangrove plant here. So people think this is a mangrove. This is a red mangrove, a resicoprine mangrove. People think this is like a seedling, but actually this is a plant. And they grow out onto the tree like this. and then they either drop down and they grow in either salty environment or brackish environment. They can grow in any environment almost, and they grow 6 feet, and then they store 10 times more carbon dioxide into the soil than normal trees. So a lot of
Hmm.
normal trees above ground, they absorb carbon from above and then they keep it above, but these store carbon below in the soil, and then it holds the soil together. And so when you have runoffs coming from the top end, from the above ground and from the hillside, they get absorbed into the soil and then they're filtered through the soil and then they go out to the ocean. So the mangroves actually filter water and then clear any pollutants, and they store them in the soil and then create a carbon deposit. So
Hmm.
then the ocean is able to thrive. And then you have inside these mangrove habitats, you have a lot of filter feeders like crabs and fish like tilapia. And I don't know if you've ever seen a video, but they actually use tilapia in some countries to filter out wastewater,
Hmm.
to, right, poop and all that stuff. So you've got crabs and fish in this ecosystem, and they're just filtering out fresh water to the ocean.
What's the incentive that locations like the Caribbean have to remove mangroves?
Survival. So these survival and then hotel development. All right. So hotel people love like surfing, beaches. Hotels don't realize that when they clear all the mangroves and all the vegetation on the beach, they just remove their first barrier of erosion. But they want like nice white beaches for people to walk on, right? And the second thing is survival. So people will clear out mangroves in Haiti and Dominican Republic to create salt farms to sell salt. And it's not a lot either, right? So they'll basically cut it out and they'll let their seawater run in, and then they'll create a little box, and then they'll start to harvest salt so they can sell that to survive.
Hmm.
So they do that, and it's typically it's done illegally, right? And they'll burn it or they'll cut it. And then another thing is sometimes people will use in other areas of the world, they'll use mangroves as building structures for their home. So they'll cut it and they'll use it as a structure for their home.
Hmm.
Or they'll convert it to a shrimp pond, which is more common in East Asia. So they'll cut them down and they'll turn it into a shrimp farm.
And when the populations of these places was much smaller, these practices didn't have the impact. But with all the people that are now living adjacent to the oceans, it's pretty pretty catastrophic.
Yeah, I think the two things that impacted these communities were commercialization of aquaculture and then just the needs assessment, right? So a lot of these communities that live by these coastal environments never had exposure to how you call like 21st century needs, right? They lived off fish. They didn't need to, sell hundreds and hundreds of fish to other, cities. And they lived off their own land, so they had fruit farms and things that they can live off. And they didn't really have a need to be like, I need to go buy new clothes or I need a new car or things like that. So with the introduction of tourism and exposure and social media, they see I experience it every day in the town that we live in because it's a tourism town. You have people here who have it pretty well. They have enough food to survive, but they also want more, right? They want what I have. They want my kind of clothes. They want my cars. So they'll do whatever they can, whatever they know. And some of them came from fishing families, right? Fishing families. So the first thing they need to do is, well, let's just fish as many fish as possible and see how much money I can make out of that. So it's kind of with the explosive growth of these communities and the commercialization, these mangrove areas get decimated without anyone really knowing until after the fact. We see it's gone.
Well, yeah, with an intersection of the this global economy and a location that people engaged in traditional practices until relatively recently, um, you can't ask people to go back to the way that they lived before. You mentioned that people want to have what you have. They're entitled to achieve
Hmm.
what they want. And yet they're in a circumstance where if they pursue it the way that they're pursuing it, they're actually going to cause more harm to themselves and their community. what is the message? Like what is the, to use a landmark term or phrase, what is the conversation for possibility that you're creating with them?
Yeah, the first conversation for possibility we're creating with them is you're not in trouble first.
Mm.
Because a lot of them do know now that the things they do can get them in trouble, right? And so there's a lot of fear around it. So one of the things that we've been dealing with in my area is it took us about 2 years to still trying to figure out who's burning the entire forest. Because the community, there's news and public news. They've been doing public news for about 10 years. Whenever there's a fire, they say, whoever's doing this, we're going to arrest you. You're going to get punished. So the first conversation is you're not in trouble. And then the second conversation is what do you need? What's going on? Are you okay? Like, do you have food? Is your family okay? Where are you living? And sometimes these living conditions, just like out here on the door where I'm living, I live in the barrio, so I live in the neighborhood. I don't live in a gated community. I'm always exposed. I'm pretty lucky. I have a nice apartment and I have everything that I need. But I walk out 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, and someone's living in a tin house with a mud floor and one light bulb, and they're sitting on a bucket. They don't have running water, they don't have any of that. And so it's on a needs basis conversation. And then it's like, and from there, I'm having a conversation of, how can we support you long term? What does that look like? How can we provide you with some tools? And, actually 2 doors down, this person that we were working with, he's a chef at a sushi restaurant here, a really famous sushi restaurant here. And, he figured it out. He moved from a tin can to a brick house. And in his backyard, he's growing crabs and chickens as well at the same time. So one of the things we want to do is in these conversations with people is like, people can't relate to me. It doesn't work, right? But if we enroll people in the community, hey, it's possible because this local person was able to get out of the situation and build something for herself, and he wants to teach you. And the key thing is teach, because a lot of people here are very, very hungry for knowledge, but they're afraid to ask for it. So offering the knowledge and allowing them to say, hey, we have this thing here, it's working. We'd like to set something up with you and partner with you. And there's nothing wrong with what you're doing. You're totally okay. It's not your fault. And then from there, we can actually have a conversation. And we battle kind of both sides. So like with the community, this is our conversation. And then with the government always wants to come in and say, let's arrest the person, bring him to the big city, and then it'll be over. And we're always like, no, we don't want to punish people. That's not the case here, sir. Like, we actually want to bring these people in and have a conversation because their needs are completely different from what we have. So the conversation for us is, with them is you'll be able to live and not be afraid to worry about, are you going to have another meal the next day? Are you going to have running water? What does that look like? And then we have to actually build training models around that. So we're going to need to train and keep a structure and a calendar for that.
You've got a situation where, people really want to do the right thing. They want to learn the best practices. They've got economic incentives that are at odds with the long-term health of their environment. What do you think are the essential components of being able to see people adopt the kind of changes they need to adopt?
Yeah, I actually dealt with this when I first came to the island because I came to the island imposing my views, pick up the trash and all that. And it was a lot of arguments, right? It was just like, with people. And then I also saw other people who came to the island who had their own views and they imposed on them. And in learning how Dharma did his work, but I also related to how I grew up. So I grew up in Canada. We were on social housing. We were considered living below poverty, right? But we had social services. And so what I saw here, what was important here is to create a safe space and then repetition and having people come in and having conversations weekly, equipping them with tools and gradually just having conversations of what their point of view is, right? So building the relationship with the community is consistency, right? So having the key component here is consistency with the project. And a lot of things in these projects that I do, there's a lot of distractions that could just be like, I want to just take a ticket. I want to go home because I don't want to deal with this. This is crazy. But, I've seen a lot of people that we worked with and they kind of fall off the project. And what had me stay in this project the longest is just being around and having conversations and consistency and showing up. A lot of the experience that people hear on the Hispaniola, maybe and possibly other islands, the island of Haiti and Dominican Republic is pretty traumatic. So Haitians don't really have a history because they were brought through slavery. And then Dominicans, they have a history where it was very murky and, unclear. So their cultural ancestral background is hard to trace for some people, right? And so they have the experience of people coming in and saying they'll help, but not actually stay, or they'll stay, but they don't actually help. So the one thing that's been a key component here is just showing up and then having them show up and then not making them wrong that they're not showing up. And there are times where I'm like, why didn't you show up? Like, okay, let's have this conversation. And then having somebody, a local person. So I'm actually in the Dominican side, I'm not actually on the front facing of my project. I'm on the behind the scenes, and I empower a local Dominican team to interface with the locals because they can actually relate and see that there's something possible. I've seen many projects here where somebody who is not from here and they interface with the project as a public, and they get the typical, I need a handout, give me a handout. Can you give me something? Right. And then, eventually people who keep giving out, they get frustrated because they don't see results, right? Because they're expecting a certain result. So by using a Dominican team that's public facing, they're able to interact and have conversations and then, build the relationships and then hold each other accountable because they're like, I'm your comrade. So, we're not here to make money off you. We're here to help you, but also just being there at all times. So in the past couple of months, we've showed up in communities with the Ministry of Environment, and people have just been like, oh, these people are still here. They're doing the work.
One of the things I want to ask you about is we both have a background with Landmark, and one of the things that Landmark is really committed to is empowering people to make a difference. And there's lots and lots of tools that are available in our courses and programs. But I think people might be interested in how you remain empowered, how you bring to bear what you've got, what you've trained and developed yourself in this whole project. Because frankly, you're dealing with a pretty uphill climb between what's going on environmentally, socially, economically.
Yeah, so probably one of the major distinctions, what we call it, that actually helped me get through a lot of this is like the stories. So, jumping into this project, there's all kinds of stories about how this project wouldn't work, or just how climate change is just not going to work, and we're like doomed. And with Landmark, being in the realm of possibility, I have choice. And there are days where I wake up and I'm like, okay, this is like impossible, right? And I get enrolled and I do the social media doom scroll and I see all the things, and then I have a choice to either enroll in that story or not. And then I get out of bed and I say, hey, like, you know what? I'm out to make a difference. And that actually moved me a couple years ago because I tried starting a project and I was not enrolled in it. And I remember one day I said, you know what? I'm going to do whatever it takes to stop this fire. And I don't even care what happens, but I'm just going to throw everything at it. And I'm going to make my life mission to just not allow this to happen ever again. Because I found out I did the math. Like I did the math of how much it would take to restore coral and how much trees to reverse climate change. I did the Excel sheet of how many trees I needed to plant and how many corals I needed to plant to restore the whole thing. And it seemed impossible. And I said, you know what? This is what I'm going to make this my life mission and not get enrolled in the stories that people tell you how things are not going to work. And that really pushed us through from almost not moving the project forward to raising enough funds to plant, 600,000 trees this year.
Mm.
And we started our first coral farm as well, and we're ready to plant it on our sculpture. And with Landmark, the distinction, there are days where I was like, I had to call my coach and say, hey, I need you to help me distinguish this thing. I don't want to get enrolled in stories. I want to, what are my promises? Where can I perform and move things forward?
Mm.
And so, Landmark, it was my lifeline on the days where I just was like, I'm not enrolled at any of this right now. And so having that conversation opened up a whole world for me to just stand for what's possible in the face of nothing.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah. Well, I'm really reminded, as somebody who led a program at Landmark called the Self-Expression Leadership Program, there's a very powerful distinction or concept in that program about being committed to something but not being attached, and being able to keep bringing your best without a guarantee that your best is going to produce a result. What is your measure for success? And I guess there's two areas that I'm curious. One is your measure for success in what you're doing environmentally, but also what's your measure for success with the people? Because this is not a one and done thing for you. You want this to continue. You want people to own it as their own.
yeah, one of my measure, well, our measure for success is how many trees we plant and then how many of those trees actually exist after 10 to 15 years.
Mm.
And at the 10th year of a mangrove is when it actually sequesters the most carbon dioxide.
Mm.
And I remember the first day when my arborist, who has a university degree, he's from Haiti, speaks like 3 languages, amazing guy, came to my house and said, I planted 2,000 trees today. And my heart like poured out. And then my next thing I said, what looks like success is those 1,000 trees you just planted actually grow into a forest and people actually get the fruits of the labor. And then as for the community, one of the things with our funding with planting trees, we're able to fund other things around the community. So cleaning up the trash, working with the community, inspiring smaller projects inside of the community, right? And then having conversations with people, what it looks like to do new things versus their typical tourism, right? A new kind of tourism. We now have Virgin Voyages cruise ship after 2 years of doing stuff, behind the scenes with their crew. We're officially signed on their cruise ship. So when you take a cruise ship, you'll see us and you'll have an excursion that says plant a tree. So instead of taking your normal ATV or catamaran or boat tour, you can actually come to us. We'll teach you how to plant trees with us in the mud. And we had people come and they were fulfilled. They were like, this is amazing. I was going on a cruise ship and I saw this as an opportunity and I wanted to sign up. And when we first had that thing go on the cruise ship, our contact said, oh, Uynghiem, 0 people signed up. And so, but can you still meet us down by the cruise ship? Because we have some VIPs that we want you to take. And I'm standing there at the port and it's like a shopping mall. There's like thousands of people pouring out on this like cruise ship and they see our sign. And then I went from 0 people I was talking to the coordinator and he's like, oh, there's like 10 people who signed up. And I had like 10 people plus the cruise, there's 20 people. And then I had like 4 or 5 people come up to me and like, hey, that thing sounds cool. Can I sign up for that? Can I follow you guys? And then I was like, I don't know what the insurance policy is to put you on my bus, but I could, yeah, you can just come along. And so people want this. And what I would see for the world for success is that there's some component of contribution and allowing people to just put back in the world. None of the cheap gimmicks where it's like, oh yeah, we're doing this thing to innovate. No, like really like where you're visiting or where you're going or actually making a difference in the community. and actually providing for a family or providing a community some kind of resource that gives back versus taking away.
But
So that,
something that strikes me in what you just shared is in the background, people want to make a meaningful contribution. And I think we sell one another short collectively. And when the cynicism kicks in, it's kind of like nobody cares, nobody matters. But I just also hear the exponential power of people that are inspired by a vision for something.
Mhm.
I just how infrequently it is we see what can be accomplished when people are working together, inspired by a vision.
Yeah, and one of the things that I noticed, one of the this is the thing that I got trained at Landmark with performance and working with people. I used to be somebody who would just kind of go around and be like, "Did you get this done? Did you not get this done?" And one of the things that we interacted with in the community, people who are very cynical about things, very, very cynical. Oh, it's not going to work, or this or that. And at Landmark, one of the things that I learned when I got trained was before going and asking somebody who didn't fulfill on the promise, or there's something that didn't work in your project, is just asking if are you okay,
Hmm.
or what happened in the past. And with people who are cynical here, there are people who are very vocal about me not doing the project, or there are people who gossiped about me, or just something like that. And my first step is to get enrolled and be like, I don't want to deal with them. Like, there's whatever. But I'm in a town of 5,000 people. So I'm gonna see them either way. So taking the stuff that I got trained at Landmark, I had to put myself aside and go, hey, like, are you okay? Is everything okay? And I have these crazy conversations on the beach because I ran into them. And they'll share something about that's not completely related to what I'm doing. Something about something in the past or some family or some project. And I literally would have people cry in front.
Hmm.
And then I say, hey, look, like, can you kind of see that the things that we're sharing here aren't related to what I was doing? And I want to help you out, but there's also like just some boundaries here. Like this, I don't do this kind of area. This is like your business. And so then it's having those interactions and having those conversations with people who are very cynical. And the first thing really is asking if they're okay. And most of the time they're not, right? And they want to share something that someone has never listened to them wholly.
But that touches on one of the questions that I want to ask. And doing these interviews now, one of the things that seems to be a commonality is that there's something that really moves people, touches people, that animates their commitment to the project. And I'm wondering, if you have anything you'd share that you want people to know, something that in your experience of pursuing this that has really moved you.
Yeah, I think, well, every time I share it with people, uh, the perspective of where these people are coming from, it really moves me. And when I say like people are scared in the community and they're struggling to survive, it really taps into how I moved with my mom and her refugee status. When she was a refugee in Vietnam, she was one of the boat people. And we grew up in a household, and we did have our struggles, but sharing with people who've never experienced that is what really moved me.
Mm.
We had a meeting in August with, we did two types of meetings. We did a community meeting, and then we did sort of like your affluent tourism visitors. And I'd have conversations with people, and I'd say, hey, like, these people are scared, they're terrified. And you calling them an idiot or saying they're just stupid or they're silly, they don't know what to do, that's completely the opposite. And so that just creates more adversity. And so that actually moved me, that's the difference that I make. And
Mm.
planting the trees, and I have a team of Haitians, and it sometimes it just breaks my heart because we're on the same island. And whenever we go plant trees or I drive them anywhere, we have to pull up the windows. I have tinted windows. We have to hide them because they're prosecuted here on the island. They're
Mm.
deported. There are people here who are Haitian who are born here, speak Spanish, don't even have anything related to Haiti. And they're picked up by the color of their skin and sent back to Haiti. And so doing this project, it moves me because my goal is to bring the island together.
Hmm.
And sometimes you're at odds because you're like, you got the TV show saying, split the island, you got politics, and everything that's not working in Haiti is not working. And then, I'm sitting in the field trying to figure out, okay, let's work with this team. And then I have a Dominican team as well sometimes that works with us. And they're always saying things that like totally blows my mind that they say. They say like, those people are like this and they shouldn't be working here. And then I'm going, we're on the same island. You know,
Yeah.
how can you work together? And those kind of conversations really move me.
Hmm.
It's scary. It's like doing the forum where we have difficult conversations with people. And I haven't all figured out. I work with Dharma and Sarah, and I work on the Dominican side. And we're piecing it together, and I'm learning.
Hmm.
And one day it would be great to see, just people come together and dissolve that border and just work together. And that would be a massive breakthrough. And that's what has me move. And I don't know why I keep coming to this island. I'm just here and I'm like working through it. I could just go back to home in Toronto and live in a nice condo and work on a computer and make my money. But this is like a challenge that like, no one's ever really gotten. And so like, I'm standing for it. And that's what really has me move is just seeing all the separations and the diversity that's available and the opportunity for people to come together on the small island
Hmm.
uh, and just to thrive through
Hmm.
environmental restoration in the trees to bring people together. And I see that as an access point. You know, if both sides one day came together and they planted a tree together, that could be the start of, having a new conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Um, well, to conclude, I have one other, just one other, well, I'm gonna take the liberty of two. First question is, where do you see, you said this, you've declared this as your life work. Where do you see this being when you're done? And perhaps it's related to what you just shared. And the second question is, uh, what do you want said about you when you're gone?
Hmm. So where do I see when this is all done? Is that correct?
When you're done,
When I'm
when you can no longer work on this.
I like my hands have touched all the projects around the world for corals and mangroves.
Hmm.
Just like we have our hands in everything and things are moving along and trees are planted and areas are conserved and people can enjoy both worlds, like going to the beach, but also seeing this amazing work that's here. And you know, just being able to love that, being able to take a flight and say, I don't feel guilty for taking a flight because I'm going to go somewhere and make a difference, and then come back home feeling rejuvenated and wanting to do more.
Hmm.
And so by the time that I'm not able to work on this more, I want to see people go, this is the new norm. You
Hmm.
know, yeah, I can go have drinks, but I can also go spend an hour or 2 hours helping out the local community or planting a tree or just seeing the fruits of it. I was in Japan and Taiwan and I saw their parks and I was mind blown. People were walking around in their parks. And the second question is what people want to say about
What do
me.
you want said about you when you're gone?
Yeah, well, if it was my funeral, I would want people to really say like he went for it. I
Hmm.
can't believe he had everything worked out. He could have lived in a nice little townhome in Ottawa or Toronto and have a little family, but man, he did the unconventional route and he just went for it. And, I can't believe he did that. And he gave us a better world.
That's wonderful and very inspiring. Wingham, I really, really thank you for spending time with us. You really, um, you're living a demonstration of what it is to be used by a possibility bigger than yourself, and I really thank you for your generosity.